Welcome to Film Friday. This is my first Film Friday. Maybe my last, but guess what? You made it. Alright, this photographer, Josef Koudelka, he's my favorite. He has inspired me to, I don't know, try to imitate him, right? It's like I've always enjoyed photography, um, fancied myself at least an average photographer, and whenever I would see his work, I would just like my jaw would drop, and it was, um, I was inspired to buy some of his books, and you know, I'm a decade since discovering his work, and I'm still inspired by him, and very interested in trying to understand, what it is that about his images that appeals to me, and how do I, um, you know, how can I have photos that look like his and have similar strengths? Um, and there's some kind of like, I was shooting 24 megapixel digital cameras or whatever, 16, I don't remember, and chasing sharp images, and pretty happy with my digital workflow. And then I'd see pictures from him from like the 60s, and I was just like, wait a second, how are his images so much more interesting, visually interesting than mine? What is it that I don't get? All right, so that's kind of an introduction, and I'm this. I guess this video is I'm sometimes I'm more inspired to be like him, and other times I'm not. But this last week, I definitely let myself just be like, you know what, I'm gonna try to copy his style and see how I do. Let's see, you know, if you just look up, if you like Google his name and you just find images of him, you'll often see him with a Leica camera and a 50. Here he is with a 50 Elkin, and I don't know, they're cool photos, but really, he did most of his popular work with this lens, on an Exacta camera. This is a Zeiss Jena Flektogon 25 f4, and I don't know. I will refer to the lens as we go forward here. All right, so just looking at some of his work. So, right, this is that 25 millimeter perspective. There's very little distortion, an even exposure across the frame. Lots of dark grays, contrast, high contrast. He's good at putting himself into action. Really, I don't want to go on forever with this work, but some of this is I'm still digesting myself, trying to understand, like, how are they so freaking brilliant? This lens does let a fair amount of kind of spatial distortion because it's a wide angle. It's not very sharp around the edges. Okay, this is. I don't want this video to be like 6 hours long, so got to keep moving. He lets the contrast. There's a lot of blacks, a lot of dark grays, His highlights do burn out, but he's using that for, to really draw the eye to something. Like look at this one, right? It's like these high highlights that pull your eye, and there's never like a distracting extreme highlight. Lots of dark grays and blacks in contrast. He's pushing a cinema film. I don't know if it was a 400 film, probably. You can see that the grain gets high. I've read that a lot of his negatives, like he wasn't afraid to overdevelop, to have denser negatives. I know with this lens being as fast as f4, a lot of this is natural light photography, so we're getting probably some amount of underexposure, not in this shot, but in some of these others, which is going to push up the grain. And then of course just like his genius compositions and subject matter is very interesting. And he's also passing these negatives off to an amazing darkroom friend at Magnum, who is super talented at making prints. And I've heard that I forget his name. He doesn't get enough credit, but he mentions that Koudelka's negatives were among the hardest he's ever had to print. And I take it probably, a combination of like a lot of shots that were underexposed, a lot of, pushing and overdevelopment, and some dense negatives, and probably all sorts of things that can make it hard. All right, so now to my images. Now this is just like, right, I'm not him, but I'm just trying to, I'm just inspired to try to learn in the direction of his talents. So this is my son George, and I'm using the 25mm Jena Flek. Which is a manual focus lens, and it's not even coupled to my camera, so it's like I'm doing zone focusing here, and I'm kind of copying that, like I'm letting the highlights go pretty darn high on the skateboard, and I'm not that interested in capturing shadow detail. I'm going into the blacks. There's not as much rich gray in this one. But I'd call that a winner. So I'm shooting Kodak XX, and I shot it at 800 because I'm going for that push look, increased grain. I'll reflect on that at the end of this, but I do think that was probably a mistake on my part. I lost too many images to underexposure. And some of that's just paired with, I used Xtol as my developer, and I'm new to using Xtol, and I don't really think I pushed the film as much as I was meaning to. Now here's one, even though I have my camera rated at 800, I probably gave a little extra exposure, and it looks awesome. I really like the dark grays, the sharpness, I like that there's grain, but it's not overwhelming. and I'm trying to, I'm using like a foreground subject there. That's, Koudelka likes to do that. And yeah, again, like strong dark shadows, and then paying a lot of attention to where my highlights are. I kind of think if I was going to edit this a little more, I might pop my son Ellery, his blanket, a little more. Yeah, but they're playing Hot Wheels. My Ellery's gonna run a car through the loop and between George's legs. Now here I knew I was having a strong backlighting, and you can see how much this old lens, right? It just doesn't have the coatings to handle, to keep good contrast, and there's lots of bleed. And it's a combination of what spherical aberration and coatings. But that's kind of cool about it, right? It's like, I get a little bit torn of like, well, maybe I should shoot with maybe a more modern, like the Zeiss Jena. It wouldn't have nearly as much of this effect going on. And you can also see that I misfocused. Like, look how sharp I am in the background. But, I don't know that I was necessarily trying to get my son in focus, but I'm using this lens like with some adapters to get it onto my M body, and it makes me, I'm a little concerned that I can't trust the distance scale. There's just not enough precision in the manufacturing of those adapters to think that 2.5 meters is really 2.5 meters. I'm not going to show every shot I took on this roll, but there's a fair number where I'm focused too far. So and here, like, my son's face was pretty dark, so I'm using basically like, I had to use some, let's see, is it dodging or burning? So it's burning. Yeah, burned his face in. I'm kind of using, I don't know, somehow, Koudelka has a lot of those like picture frames and kind of just shapes. He often pushes them all the way to the edge. But I'm kind of bringing in some foreground objects and yeah. It was fun to shoot with this lens, right? It's like a 25. It's easy to just kind of stand back and take a big room picture, and and I wanted to make sure I was getting close enough. I find that's one of the challenges with wide angle, is like making sure that you get in. You got to get in close, and yeah, I like how this one turned out, really. But I can't really. It's hard, this is my son, so I would love this picture, almost regardless. But all right. This one kind of reminds me of a Koudelka image. He often had people pose. he does get people, in play and in action, and there's some amount of documenting or journalism happening, but a fair number of his most popular images are just people posing, maybe couples, families. Yeah. There's a nice side lighting here. Get that contrast, and I like where the highlights are popping, kind of bring the attention into the good spots. Yeah, this was just all my son George and his play. Liked the shape he was making. And another thing I noticed that Koudelka does is he does get down on the ground a lot. I don't know if he used that Exacta camera. I don't know if he had it. There's different types of viewfinders or prisms. You can shoot it as like a waist level shooter or eye level, like it's an SLR. So it's like, I don't know, but a lot of I can tell that his camera, like he's a tall guy too. So like a lot of his shots, like he's either shooting from the waist or he's down on the ground, which is really effective, especially with children. So this is deliberately trying to copy that. And I got lucky with my focusing here. I mean, this is probably this is f4, and you can even see I've got an out of focus background, but I nailed focus on him basically. Now, something that makes me feel like this is a Koudelka image is like these flowers up here, right? The way that the highlights hit hard, the contrast, but even the shape, kind of the right, that lens is soft up there. And it's kind of mushy. So you get just like, it's I don't know, it's like a graphical, it doesn't look like a sharp image, right? It's like, but it's a strong element. I also like that, using the slightly slower shutter and getting some, it's like, I think this is just the right amount of sharpness, but also just like a little bit of motion to it. Yeah, and they're sword fighting. All right, now this one I wanted Ellery to kind of frame the left side, right? And I'm using a lot of shadow, right? And I'm stealing that from Koudelka, of knowing that there's going to be a lot of blackness, and then lots of dark grays, those high highlights, contrast along the face. Yeah. And I got those flowers in the picture again. Give some credit to my wife who put those flowers up. All right, now here we're actually out and about in town. We're at Powell's bookstore. This was such a fun outing. I used to come to the bookstore with my kids, and it had to be all about them. And we just go to the kids section. It was all usually a little stressful and quick. But this time they're both getting into reading on their own, so they really wanted to spend more time picking things out. And even once they picked them out, they were interested in reading them. And and here's my two sons, clearly showing some independence as readers. And I actually had time to look at some books for me. Of course, I went to the photography section. But I also like how this picture turned out. The and I'm gonna give the film credit here of just like I like how the I'll zoom in a little bit, but I really like how this looks up here. And again, I got down low. Yeah, lens almost passes as sharp here. All right. I don't know that I don't love this image. I'm trying to get better at using like out of focus foreground objects, subjects. I kind of thought this old couple ordering was sort of interesting, and kind of the order pickup. Yeah, my son's hand gesturing is kind of interesting. But I also have no idea what he's doing. I mean, there's nothing up there. It's not like he's looking at a menu. It's like, so I don't know. It was a little bit of an idea that I had that didn't quite pan out. No, I like this one. This was another one that I gave a little extra exposure. And so it's kind of a takeaway from this roll is that I, especially if I'm going to continue to use this X-Tol and I really probably just need to rate the film at box speed or maybe 400. Yeah, and then I can just, if I want to crush some shadows, I can just do it with the digital darkroom. I just like this lady had interesting glasses and her purse, and this jacket was cool. And I'm not very good at kind of being sneaky and taking pictures of people. It even kind of makes me uncomfortable. Feels like some type of violation. But I managed it here, and there's a lot I really like about this. Like I love how this looks. I like how her jacket turned out. Right, I like how her sunglasses turned out. I like how her purse kind of hangs here. Yeah, I also like this umbrella behind her. All right, I don't know that there's nothing about this that strikes me as Koudelka, but just kind of having fun with a 25mm lens. And that one nice thing about the lens is it can focus down to like absurdly close, like an inch. I don't know if it's an inch, but that thing can. You will never need it to focus closer. All right, so a little outdoor ping pong action. I just like my son George is really getting into it. And then I wish I had. I didn't really register with me that the bottom of this ping pong table was so interesting. I didn't notice it until after I was looking at the pictures and was like, oh, I wish I had done more with that. My wife here smiling. Got there's a milkshake. Mother, so this is a pretty decent picture, but I wish I'd taken a few more here. I also like that I got the Pals books in the background with like the art, the city art project or whatever, sculpture. All right, this one I got a little more into the action. I took a few of these, and this was the best one I got. I like. I'm kind of like get the sense of the energy of the paddle and the ball, but you can kind of see Ellery's face, and then George is over there ready for it, and with Mom watching. So I like what I got from a family man perspective. So now we're back to the house. We're looking at the books, and Ellery's reading and sharing it. The funny part, I think it's a Garfield book with his brother George. Yeah, this is a good one. I also like that I got my photography book in the foreground. Yeah, Ellery's smile is nice. George is clearly interested and smiling, and then Ellery's pointing fingers, right? I like that. That's a nice, strong draw. And then Barbara's face is soft, and she's tired, but happy to be with her kids by the window. I didn't really edit this one much. I don't know. I'd be curious to come back and see what I would do if I spent more time with it. This is that part of the night where it's like there's still enough light to shoot. This is probably f4, 5.6, and I'm shooting at probably a 30th of a second. With something that's really a 250 speed film. It's nice because I'm just using sunlight, but it's not too contrasty. It's that best part of the day. All right, so this is late at night, and there's basically just using the incandescent bulb in the bathroom. There might be a little bit of light coming through the skylight. Sort of reminds me. This sort of reminds me of a Koudelka shot. It kind of reminds me. I might even pull it up. It kind of reminds me of this one, right? Partly just because of the kind of the flatness of it all, and then also the high amount of grain. Which this one was pretty underexposed, and so it's pretty grainy, right? When you underexpose, you're relying more on the larger silver halide salts. And so you get a grainier look. And my son was making this cute little bubble. Sometimes my kids don't want to be in front of the camera, and he was kind of having one of those moments, but then he decided that he would blow a little bubble. And it's nice. It's like there's just enough sharpness where he came out, and you can make out the little bubble there. And there's some tonal contrast, nice gradation. I mean, it's grainy, but it's sort of the look I was going for. I also kind of like the way I use the shower curtain here, to frame on the right side, and then also just like the texture of the wall. Kind of be interested in maybe making it a little darker. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Now this is maybe my favorite in the set. It kind of reminds me of this one. Right, it's that partly because of the wide angle lens, right? But you get the strong, his arms make a strong, give a sense of depth and motion and energy. His brush, right? This is probably again like a 15th or 30th of a second. So there's energy to the brush. And also, I love that his foot is here off the ground here and this pattern behind it. That I caught him in the mirror, right? And then there's his face, right? With this almost like a Arnold Schwarzenegger pose. And then we get this, this interesting shower curtain. These dark grays over here. My son surrounded by the highlights, and then his hands right here, his little fingers. He's not. So I wish I could see his face a little better. Yeah, maybe. That detail's not there. And that's has probably quite a bit to do with, I shot at f4, and this is relatively close to the edge of the frame, and it's not even what's in focus. Yeah. So yeah, this was one of my favorites. And then here's the last one I'm sharing. Just trying to sneak in all my family behind them, and this is Barbara making sure that they're safe crossing the street. She's holding Ellery's hand. She's kind of got her left hand ready there for George. And I also really like, George's stance kind of makes the photo, the way he's holding his pockets and his pants and strutting a bit. And I like that his kind of one of his left foot didn't even quite make it in the frame. Yeah. I don't know. There's something about this one that feels, I don't know, didn't quite work out as well as I wanted it to. I think I really like shooting the 25mm lens. I'm using an external finder, the Voigtlander 2125. So I'm definitely, which is nice. I can look through that. I'm seeing even wider, which is awesome. It helps me find compositions. I also have the 25mm Biogon, and I can't decide if, I think I'm going to try that next, right? See what a sharper lens that has, higher resolution around the edges, much stronger flare control. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see, do I lose something, or do I gain, or I don't know. That'll be kind of the next exercise here, is to but I really like the 25mm perspective, right? It's like, and I think that's one of the reasons an iPhone is basically 25mm in a lot of smartphones, is that it's like, it's basically as wide as you can start to get before things start to get difficult and wonky and distorted. And you get a lot of life and action, family action and environment, right? It's like, but it is kind of strange that I look at a lot of 24mm pictures and 25mm pictures, and I feel like I have a strong preference. It might be totally made up, but for 25. But then there's I get a little bit of do I really want to be trying to get good at a focal length that's very common because of smartphones. But I think I think this is sort of I enjoy, in 2 months, I'll probably have put down the Koudelka kick, and I'll have moved on to maybe my own thing, or maybe just trying to be interesting to maybe try to copy somebody else. And I saw a 75 millimeter shooter recently that inspired me, and but I don't know. I just also want to be clear that like I know I'm not nearly as good as Koudelka, right? I hope I don't come across as like I can do what he did. You know, it's more of like I'm just on this journey of trying to get better as a photographer and to be able to make images that that I love, and yeah. Okay. Take care.